What if the pursuit of happiness is making us miserable?
Humans are made to be excellent. We are not made to be mediocre. I was going to be the world's greatest French horn player as far as I was concerned. I was practicing hours and hours and hours a day. I was taking every competition, belonging to every ensemble that I possibly could. If I don't take sufficient risk, I'm not going to get big rewards. If you understand what your natural strengths are and you can walk from one curve of excellence to the next, happiness can be yours. But you can't resist. You got to go all in, man. Paying attention to what you're getting better at, paying attention to what's driving your passion, paying attention to, what your purpose and significance appears to be. I say, look, if you're not willing to give your heart away and have it get broken, you're not an entrepreneur, because that's really the risk that matters most.
I am so stoked to sit with you to have this conversation. I've been reading your work for a long time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love the show, and I'm really honored to be here.
Awesome. that works, doesn't it? So
long-time listener, first-time guest.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like your show is in all the places I want to be.
Oh, that's fun.
Because people who are high performers, they want the best information, and this is the best information. This is what you're dedicated to doing. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very
for including
much.
me.
That's a great way to start this conversation, because you've done two things exceptionally well that I'm fascinated by: the way you've designed your life, and I'll start with this basic, idea that I think we all want to live a great life.
Yeah,
I don't know anyone that says I want a miserable, below satisfaction way of living.
Right.
And you've organically lived that way, and now you're talking about it. Using science in an applied way to help others. So you have something that I think is incredibly powerful, and I want to open that up and celebrate and understand how you've done it and where it's gone sideways for you,
right? And
what we all can learn to be a little bit better. So let's first start by your path.
Right.
You don't have a normal path.
It's not the most traditional path to being an academic.
No.
At
one of the greatest, if not the greatest institution on the planet.
So we say.
So we say in Boston. So we say.
So it says in the brochure.
Okay, so that's it. Harvard Business School is a very special place.
It's a wonderful place. It lives up to its reputation, I think.
So let's go back though. How did this thing start? Because you got to academics late.
Super late. So I come from an academic family. My grandfather was an academic. My father was a biostatistician, very brilliant scientist, and I was determined not to take that path. So I was a musician from the time I was a little kid. I was talented first as a violinist, then as a pianist. And then at 8, I started the French horn, and that really captured my imagination because I was good at it and it was fun. And that's all I did. That's really all I wanted to do. I was completely driven to be the world's greatest French horn player from the time I was 9, 10 years old. No joke.
You remember that?
Oh yeah.
That type of orientation.
No. I not only remember it, so does everybody else around me. I was going to be the world's greatest French horn player as far as I was concerned. I was practicing hours and hours and hours a day. I was taking every competition, belonging to every ensemble that I possibly could.
Why?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because people are driven to greatness. Because people are driven to significance. We want to be somebody. Look, humans are made to be excellent. We are not made to be mediocre. A lot of people are mediocre because, the world says, take it easy. The world says, cut the corner, whatever it happens to be. Or there's bad luck or pathology or whatever it happens to be. But we're not made to be mediocre. And if you've got the opportunity, take it. And I did. That's all I wanted to do. Now, there was a piece missing that I didn't know at the time. But as a teenager, I was good and getting better. And all I wanted to do was go pro. And I did when I was 19. I spent a little over a semester in college at CalArts, California Institute of the Arts, which is a freaky place here.
It's a wild place right
not
up the
far
road
from where we are here.
Yeah. And for folks that don't know what that means, it's like this beautiful blend of arts and kind of, would you call it, edge pushing approach to life?
Yeah, totally. It's the most bohemian place ever, basically. And certainly I was not prepared to live that, live a self-disciplined lifestyle at age 18 at a place like that. But that wasn't really the problem.
But you didn't fall off the rails there.
No, I dropped my required classes and wound up on academic probation because all I wanted to do was play the horn.
Oh, you did fall off the rails.
Yeah, I didn't completely fall off the rails, but they were encouraging me to pursue my excellence elsewhere. And so I took the opportunity. I bailed, and I went
Did
pro.
you got kicked
I didn't
out?
get kicked out, but I was actually transferring to another conservatory in Philadelphia called the Curtis Institute of Music, which is a very famous place for classical music. But in the meantime, I was offered a position in a touring chamber music group, and I took it. That was not probably the best career decision I ever made, because had I stayed and improved my skills and gone through a more traditional academic training, I would have wound up a better musician than I was. But all I wanted to do was play all day. I wanted to go pro.
At that time, did you have a chip on your shoulder? Did you have, what was fueling you?
I wanted adventure. I wanted to see the world, and I wanted to do it being a musician. But
so you had a bigger vision.
Yeah. So your background, you have a lot of background in sports, and you know that when people go pro too early, it's a problem. They can get injured. Reasons, they psychologically, it's not healthy, and so it's a good idea for most football and basketball players to finish college if they can. It's a bad idea usually to go pro after your freshman year, and because there's a lot of stuff that can happen, and you're also physically maturing, and the same thing is true with these professions in classical music where you have a lot of fine motor skill. You need more time in an environment where you can develop in a healthy way, and so going pro is hard. I was running with professionals that were 20, 30 years older than me. And I, it wasn't the best environment. Anyway, it was fine. I had a great time is the bottom line. And I had no real thought about going back to college. And after 6 years of that,
how did you avoid a 12-step program or jail? How did you do that?
Yeah. Well, the jail came later. No, that's not actually. I was mostly under the tutelage of people who were pretty morally developed people. I was working with a quintet at the time that was really good. And I toured for a couple of years with a jazz guitar player named Charlie Bird as well. And he was a fundamentally grown-up guy. I mean, he had gone through the bebop era and, the jazz samba era, and he had not got addicted to heroin. One time I was on tour with him. I said, Charlie, how'd you not die of an overdose like all your friends? Because I was telling stories about Coltrane, about, Charlie Parker and the whole thing. Those guys were all junkies. How'd you avoid it? How'd you not get addicted to heroin? He said, yeah, man. Yeah, I tell you, just good luck. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But then he said, I learned a lot. And I remember kind of learning at his knee about what it meant to be a relatively healthy individual. And I came from I had a good family, came from a traditional religious background. And although that wasn't my thing in my 20s, later it was. But I had this wiring that was actually fundamentally healthy, thank God. And I was super serious about excellence. And you can't take drugs and be excellent. You can't be a drunk and go on stage. Can't be done. I mean, it can't be. I don't care what anybody says. You can't be a classical musician. You can do that in rock and roll.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, okay, but you can't. If you're playing a concerto in front of an orchestra and you show up drunk, it's gonna suck.
Got it.
Is the bottom line. You simply
because the
can't.
precision.
It's all precision in classical music.
Right.
And that's what I was about, was that level of performance. When I was 25, I fell in love with a girl, and I chased her to Barcelona. Quit my job, took a job in the Barcelona Orchestra in a bid to get. To convince her that she should marry me.
Wait. Let's pause here because you're still married.
I'm still married.
To her.
To her.
You said it like she's not married, but no, you're still married to her. Okay.
Yeah. So she didn't speak a word of English. I mean, it was the stupidest thing. I mean, it was It was quixotic. It was like Don Quixote.
Yeah. Okay, but this is really, there's something very important about how you've approached just these first 4 things in your life, right? It's not reckless, but you chip all in.
My life's a startup.
There you go.
I'm the founding entrepreneur of my enterprise. And if I don't take sufficient risk, I'm not going to get big rewards. The rewards in life for the entrepreneurial startup of life is love and happiness. And you're not going to get rich in love and happiness unless you take significant risk and willing to have a complete disaster. You got to go all in, man.
That sounded I can't wait for that soundbite to come back in my head. Like, that was awesome. You got to go all in,
You got to go on in the enterprise of your life. It's one thing to borrow $10 million from some rich guy and start some internet startup. How boring. How boring. The real startup is you. That's really where it's at. And so I tell young people today, I say, look, if you're not willing to give your heart away and have it get broken, you're not an entrepreneur. Because that's really the risk that matters most.
It's the second hit that you said, like, you got to go for it, man.
Yeah.
And the idea that it might not work out, that's the real risk. Like the classical definition of trust is making something that you value vulnerable.
Right.
Because it's giving it to this precious thing, time, money, heart, whatever it might be, to another person so that you're closer, more connected, so it grows in some way. But there is that vulnerability that's required in the risk-taking process for the great life,
For sure.
whatever that means.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you that, like, I so connect with how you're talking right now about the entrepreneur thing. I've never heard the framing, the being an entrepreneur of self. I've never heard the framing there. But I didn't pull the trigger enough when I was young.
Why not?
I was afraid. I was edge pushing, but not to the level I knew I could get. So what am I trying to say is that the rest of my peers would be like, Mike, that's whoa. And then my true ones that really understood what edges were like, you aren't even close, dude. You're definitely holding back in love and, on the edge of, like, whether we're surfing and all the adventure sports I did. So I really appreciate this piece of how you designed your life and done it.
Yeah, this is as far as I'm concerned, these early chances that I took really set the stage for not being afraid or at least being afraid but having courage.
So what is it now? You had this practice early on of going for it.
Yeah.
And then how does that benefit you now?
Yeah. So now I know that you can't do the things that you want to do without taking significant risk. And when they don't work out, it's fine.
But that's the part that's hard to embrace.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of young people are really suffering from today. I talk to a lot of my students who've never been on a date. And they're in their early 20s, they've never been on a date. How is this possible you never been on a date? When you and I were in our 20s, like, what else do you want to do? You want to fall in love. That's what young adults are wired to do.
I was not trying to fall in love when I was 20. You were.
Well, it's not like I want to fall in love. It's not, I'm like some sort of weird sentimentalist, but I was, once I met the girl who didn't speak a word of English, by the way.
So she must
Nor
have been
did I
beautiful.
speak a word of Spanish. Oh, she's still smoking.
Yeah, there you go. You're still a musician here.
36 years later. I
married my wife at 25.
Good.
Yeah, so I know that. And I would say my son is 16. I would not, I support him whatever he wants, like unconditionally. Support and challenge is kind of a model that's important for me. And I would say, like, if he brought home, that sounds weird. If he was in love with somebody at 25 and was like, I'm all in, I'd say, okay, I want to have a conversation with you. There's some great, awesome, this is special. Right. And there's some unique challenges that I just want to make sure that we're thinking through.
Sure. That's good fatherly advice.
Yeah. The ones that showed up for me is that we were young, our identities were not fully formed.
Yeah.
And it was like two trees that were growing.
Yeah.
And instead of deep roots, strong trunk, and our branches touching each other and being able to sway in the wind together, our trunks started to get so close that they got entangled. And where she ended and I began started to get confusing.
Are you still married?
Oh yeah, we're still married.
Okay.
And we worked all this out in what I would say was the greatest adventure, the truest and most honest adventure of my life. It's like, no, wait, hold on. This is at age 30. Mike, who are you? Lisa, my wife, who are you? And we need to do this work to understand each other, self better, so that we can be there for each other and not just be kind of this mashed up one person.
No, I get that. And you do need to be individuals, but the data say, and your experience shows, as does mine, that the most successful lifelong unions, because we're a pair bonded species and we're happiest when we're one and done. That's when people are actually, it doesn't mean it's going to work out. And a lot of people listening to us, like, it didn't work out that way, but life is complicated. But the highest chance of it working out that way is when your marriage is a startup, is a joint startup. It's a mature joint startup. That's the best. The merger model is not as good.
What's a merger model?
The merger model is when you're both independent adults that have your own lives and you merge after 32 or 33. That's the merger model.
That is I know this research and what's right underneath of it is
it can work.
The habit formation is already pretty established.
You're harder to domesticate, especially men.
The harder to domesticate is what you just said, right? Yeah. And that leads me to think that, who was the evolutionist? His point was like, no, we're actually not monogamous, right? We are more of a tribal communal thing than paired, what you just suggested.
Right.
So are you familiar with the counterpoint to?
Yeah, sure, for sure. I just think that the preponderance of evidence is that we're happiest and we're most successful as a pair bonded species. And again, there's a lot of pair bonded species in nature and a lot that aren't. Right.
Right.
And
yeah,
and the question is, which is Homo sapiens? And I think that the best evidence suggests that we do best when we're pair bonded, and we have enough free will that we can decide.
Oh, so we had Sapolsky on.
Oh yeah, Robert Sapolsky.
Yeah, he was. I love.
He doesn't believe in free will.
No, he was like, "What are you talking about?"
I believe in free will.
Yeah, I do too. Right. We went down the rabbit hole pretty strongly together.
Yeah, but I understand what he's saying.
He's just basically pointing to like, if we really understood how the system works.
Yeah. No, I understand the science. I understand the neuroscience behind that. But the bottom line is that whether or not it's an illusion or not, we still make decisions.
Correct.
And whether or not those decisions are somehow preordained according to circumstances or not, we do best when we make the decision to be pair bonded and to be faithful and to be loyal.
Well, the research there is very clear on happiness.
Right. For sure.
No, this is right down your new book. Right. It's very, very clear.
Yeah.
And so, okay, hold on. We're still on your upbringing, still on your path. We're going to get to happiness, which is really good.
The fall in love startup. Right?
Yeah, well, I think that this is really important, that if you're young and you're listening right now, like, chip in, take your shots.
Totally.
And if you're older, you're my age, you're 50 something. What am I, 52? If you're 50.
You're a kid.
Hey,
I just turned 60.
Did you?
Yeah.
You look great, man.
I feel great. If I had your hair, I could be president of the United States.
Would you want to?
Look, if called.
Yeah, right.
Is somebody calling?
Okay, the answer is yes then. Man, I would line up behind.
That'd be terrible. It'd be so terrible.
Do you have too many skeletons? Or?
No, I don't have any skeletons. I don't have any significant skeletons at all. But it's just, I just love not being a politician. Yeah. I've worked with a lot of politicians because I was the president of a think tank in Washington, D.C.
I was going to say,
they got a tough life. They have a tough
what
life.
ways? Yeah.
They're intensely public lives. They're taking all kinds of heat all the time for the most innocuous decisions. They're getting abused mercilessly. They have to constantly relitigate to get their job back. And by the way, it's a job that pays not that much, and you have to have 2 homes, and you're constantly separated from your family. It's a very, very tough life. Most of them are awesome. Most of them love their country, and they're highly competent, and they're patriotic and want to serve. But you're tarred with the brush of all the ones that are not so awesome. It's a very tough life.
Yeah,
very tough life.
I hear that. I don't have a small violin,
no, I
for
hear
them, but
I know. Yeah. Well, partly because of the bad ones.
Yeah, I'm not up and close at all to politics. You would have a much richer understanding, but I do appreciate that, like, a couple wild ones can paint a picture for everybody. You know, but
a little bit of corruption is like one rat in the woodpile.
Yeah. I mean, the cynic approach in me is like, you've got to trade yourself some of your moral code to be able to have those positions, which I find probably not accurate, but also at the same time, like, a pretty egregious as a proposition.
Yeah.
But okay.
Anyway,
notwithstanding.
Sorry, I keep sending down these weird rabbit holes. I'm sorry.
Is that how your mind works? Do you go down rabbit holes?
No, I think our mind collectively works that way.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I do like rabbit holes.
We have significant cognitive similarity.
Yeah.
And that's the reason that we go here and then we're going there.
Yeah.
Right?
And we'll I trust that we'll hold the thread.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in your hands.
Yeah. Okay, good. So chipping all in, early love life.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This is not a rabbit hole, but it's a jump forward 25 years, if you will. How do you speak to the person who says, I'm divorced twice.
Right.
And or once or whatever, and I'm on my second act.
Right.
Okay. And Strength is Strength is what I'm kind of pointing. Mm-hmm. This is a wildly successful book that you wrote that really hit a nerve for folks that are looking at their second act. Right. And in the sport world, your book got a lot of traction.
Yeah.
Right. Because at age 34, you've chipped all in. You are the best or one of the best in the world. Now what? So your book gets circulated in the transition phases, like
Right.
yeah, which is really cool.
Right,
So
which is people in their 50s in finance and people in their 30s in sports and
Right.
different times for different careers.
That's
for sure.
exactly it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and maybe even the empty nesters.
Mhm.
You know, is that what you're pointing to? 50s in finance?
Yeah,
or-
well, 50s in finance, and it's different for men and women. But the whole point is, change is coming. You try
change
to
is here.
you try to avoid it,
Mm.
and you're going to have trouble.
Yeah.
If you understand what your natural strengths are, and you can walk from one curve of excellence to the next, happiness can be yours. But you can't resist. See, life it's interesting because a lot of strivers in general, they resist too much. And one of the reasons that they're so successful is because they're strong at resisting the urge to sit on the couch. They're resisting the urge to follow the culture, to go out and drink with their friends. They resist those particular urges, but then they tend to resist the healthy things that are coming in their own lives, and their discipline that worked for them starts to work against them. And that becomes a problem. That's why I wrote my book. I wrote it for me. I wrote it for me. I retired as a CEO when I was 55, and I'm like, uh-oh. And I was very worried. I mean, I retired because I saw change coming, and I'd done the research. I mean, that's what we do. It's what you and I were trained to do.
Yeah.
And you better treat yourself, because how many miserable psychologists have you met? Plenty.
Oh,
How many marriage counselors who can't stay married and
Right.
have
it's alarming.
it's a problem, and it's
Yeah.
because they're not following their own advice. A cook who doesn't eat his own cooking, be very suspicious. So I saw it, but I didn't know what to do. So this research actually guided me into understanding what I was going to be able to do best and design this part of my career, which is teaching, writing, and speaking publicly about the best science about human happiness and how I can bring it to a broad public, plays uniquely into my cognitive abilities that come after 50.
Which is holding lots of information and data points and reference points into
Pattern recognition, storytelling, mentoring, teaching.
perspective.
Mhm.
Kind
That's
of
what we're good at.
The
What
meta.
we're
of
not
the
good
whole
at is
thing.
indefatigable energy, working memory, and innovation.
Mm.
That's what we're not as good at.
Mm.
I mean, you and I still innovate,
Yeah.
but our knowledge and our thinking is more synthetic than innovative
That's cool.
after 50.
Yeah, I feel like I'm inspired as much as I ever was about what could be.
Yeah.
And I have better resources to innovate that I did when I was 25. However, I feel like now I'm part of a system that's not innovating in a way that I once thought I could.
Sure.
There's a lot of creativity still now. Creativity and innovation are different. This is how I think about creativity.
Mhm.
It's creativity. It's new to me. Something happened.
Mhm.
Innovation. It's like, oh, it's new to others as well.
Yeah.
How do you think about the two?
So you can be incredibly creative as you get older. Largely, you're seeing the potential in tying together other ideas that you're encountering.
Yeah.
So the synthetic mind, AKA synthesis,
Mhm.
as opposed to original innovation, is that in which you see other people's work. In their work, you see things that they don't see, and you tie it to all the other things around you. That's what you're uniquely great at doing. That's where you have the successful podcast, by the way, because you're connecting ideas. Right now, you're connecting a million different points.
Yeah.
When you were 30 years old, you'd be like,
I didn't have enough.
It's like, can we please stay on the script?
I thought about this, and
You'd
we're
be
not
extremely linear, and you're
Mhm.
not linear now
Yeah.
because you're actually as linear. I mean, you're getting to a point, of course, but you're getting to the point by connecting it to all these different literatures and all these different ideas, and from sports to psychology and all that, because you have crystallized intelligence,
Mhm.
which, as opposed to the fluid intelligence, which is the innovation and working memory.
And the crystallized intelligence, just for the listener, says, what is that? It's when there's like information, you
It's
know how
wisdom.
to spell,
Yeah.
something. Oh, you call that wisdom.
Well, wisdom is characteristic of crystallized intelligence. Wisdom is you know a lot, but you know how to use it and have perspective on it.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I don't collapse those two.
Yeah, I mean they're similar, but it's just as a shorthand, you'd think of it as brains and wisdom.
Okay.
Where wisdom is a virtue and brains is a characteristic.
God, I
Yeah.
don't totally.
Yeah.
The sentiment of wisdom that you're speaking, I go, yep, that's it.
As pattern recognition.
Yeah, insight is what
Yeah.
I think is the step before wisdom.
Good.
So insight is like, oh,
Yeah.
that's how this thing works. And
And
if you get
if you
enough
do your-
insights together, you get to a place of like,
Exactly right.
I get it.
And that's what everybody listening to us who is 30, that's what you get to look forward to. if you let yourself.
If you let yourself.
Yeah. If you try to stay in the past, stuck doing what you were doing, you're a star litigator at that law firm, right? I'm going to keep up with the young guys or I'll be damned. You're going to be really frustrated.
Well, this is why we see like this hustle hard thing it's like the elders are trying to teach the young people about how to have the good life. And this hustle hard approach to life is surfacing in a way that I look at it and I say, yeah, okay. But that's like you're speaking to yourself, jacking yourself up with testosterone or growth hormones and like thinking that you need a six pack when you're 56. Maybe you have one. I don't know, or 60, whatever you said you were. Like you're pretty fit, you know?
Yeah, but I have the data. If you actually have a full six pack when you're 60, your body fat's too low.
Yeah, this is correct, right? And
sub 6 body fat at 60 means something's wrong.
Yeah, and there's something also like the body is beautifully designed to be a little bit more sensitive as we get older, rather than just like Cro-Magnon the entire, arc of one's life.
That's correct. That's correct. There's a lot of, if following the nature's path for your best life doesn't mean following what you think was your best life early on in your own life. I mean, that's resistance. That's resisting the natural trends that are actually healthy. That's when your self-discipline is setting you back in that case.
I really like how you're using resistance and discipline as a strength on the first arc, but maybe that same thing can get away on the second arc.
Sure.
I really like that idea. How do you help folks understand and work with that incredible discipline to be great at something and then to apply it in the right contour for the next arc?
It's important that people understand that their strengths are naturally changing, and you shouldn't use your discipline to not let your strengths change, to resist the own change in your own strength. So that requires a ton of self-awareness. Paying attention to what you're getting better at, paying attention to what's driving your passion, paying attention to, what your purpose and significance appears to be. Yeah. You're supposed to actually change. That's a normal and healthy thing. And to say, no. If I change, it's evidence of weakness. That's a problem. And so that cognizance of who you are as a person will be your strength. And honesty, self-honesty is at the core of that.
The last point is, I was going to go to the first point about awareness.
Right.
I think it's at the seat of this whole thing.
Right.
That is the inside game is like, are you sensitively aware of what's happening inside of you and accurately aware as well what's happening outside of you?
Right.
So that you can pivot and adjust.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Do you have an awareness practice that has been important for you? Is it your writing? Are you meditating? Are you?
I'm a traditional religious person, and that's why I take to prayer. That's a process in most traditional religions. It's called discernment.
That's it. Yep.
Discernment is one in which you say, I want to understand the divine will. I want to understand, even if it's hard and even if it hurts, I want the truth.
Are you Christian?
Yeah, I'm a Catholic.
Catholic, yeah. So
I go to mass every day. And part of the reason is, and by the way, I mean, I teach people about this particular insight that comes from transcendence, which is to say to transcend yourself, that you can get from a traditional religious practice, but you can also get it by studying the Stoic philosophers seriously, or studying the fugues of Johann Sebastian Bach, or starting a Vipassana meditation practice. So I can say as a Catholic, my way is awesome, but I can tell you as a scientist, my way is not the only way.
Yeah, that's accurate. And one of the 5 quote unquote sources of power from Buddhism, discernment is one of those. The ability to, the process to get down into the truth of something, like how does this really work? And to think deeply about something is the discernment process. And there's lots of ways to do that, to your point. And if you don't have a practice to sharpen your discernment,
you'll fool yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say life just kind of will roll over you, and you go to fool yourself. That's super.
You'll fool yourself. You'll read your own press releases. You'll start to believe these things that people say about you. And if you got to want the truth all the time.
People ask me all the time, like, Mike, like, who are your favorite ones to work with? Anyone who's committed to the truth.
Yeah,
I'm all in.
Totally.
because it's honest and it's real.
Yeah.
Those are the environments and the people I need to be around.
It's incredibly bracing, and it's so beautiful. And it's just, it's like, so you're the kind of guy who goes, sooner or later, the doctor is going to say, Mike, I got your test results back. I need you to come into my office. Sooner or later, that's going to happen.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yes.
Not today, not tomorrow. I hope not next year, but me too.
Yeah.
Right? And work to be the person who's like, just tell me.
Yeah.
Just tell me.
It's good information.
I can cope with this. I know I can. I'm not going to like it. I mean, of course I'm not going to like it, but I can cope with it. And what I really don't want is not knowing. What I really don't want is a lie.
Ignorance is bliss is not something that I would point to. It sounds like you're not either.
No. And, it really depends on what you mean by bliss. I mean, the truth is that real happiness has all kinds of negative experiences and hard growth involved in it. Real happiness is living your life fully alive.
Okay, we're going to zoom past your PhD at Rand. Okay, we're going to zoom past that and you
my dubious academic background.
Well, yeah, no, we're going to zoom past you being in love in Spain. You said, right, Barcelona, and
got married in Barcelona. Yeah.
And
convinced my wife who
playing the French horn in an orchestra. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And being an artist and then finding your way back to academics.
Yeah.
We're going to zoom past that for a minute and dive right into happiness.
Right.
When I looked at where you were going, I was like, okay. And I had a mixed response.
Uh-huh.
But then when I double clicked, I almost exhaled like, okay, great. So my first okay was like, why happiness?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what my thought or concern was.
Mm-hmm.
And then how you're approaching it, I was like, okay, that's cool. So when we ask people, what do you want in life?
I want to be happy.
I want to be happy.
I want to be happy. That's what they say.
And I was like, man,
not knowing
why
what
is
that means.
Arthur writing another book? Why is he writing a book on happiness? I think it's overrated.
Mm-hmm. The way that we understand it popularly, it most certainly is.
Yeah. And that's why I was concerned. And I was like, well, okay, I have great respect for your work.
Mm-hmm.
Why happiness? When I double clicked and got underneath of it, I was like relieved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is what I want. I want to be happy. Yes, I want to be sad.
Mm-hmm.
I want to understand fear. I want to embrace the entire spectrum of the human emotional experience.
Right.
And I don't want to be overrun by any of them. And I don't want to mute or minimize or stay away from some. I want to live a full life.
Right.
And when I read how you approached it, I was like, we're on the same page.
Totally.
Yeah.
Happiness gets people's attention in truth. And, I teach a class at Harvard called Leadership and Happiness that's very oversubscribed because of the word happiness in the title. And then they learn what I mean by that, which is not feelings. Mm-hmm. It's not, I want to feel happy all the time. Oh, golly, what a boring life. Are you kidding me?
Muted.
Yeah,
Completely
the truth
muted.
is, you just told me you want to be fully alive.
Mm-hmm.
This is what all the great philosophers have talked about at the end. Eudaimonia, which is Aristotle's concept of happiness, is a good life well lived, not bereft of sadness because you wouldn't be fully alive.
That's right.
Saint Irenaeus, this early Christian saint, he said, the glory of God is a man fully alive. He didn't say a happy dude.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He said a man fully alive is what it comes down to. And to be fully alive, to be the happiest person that you can be requires tons of suffering.
And okay.
Suffering is sacred, man. I mean, it's indispensable in a full life.
Open up suffering. What does that mean to you?
So I study a whole lot about the neuroscience of emotional experiences. And the reason I do that is because I work like you do with high performers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really holds people back from high performance is the inability to manage themselves emotionally. So emotions are poorly understood. People talk about wanting to have good feelings and wanting to avoid bad feelings. It's a complete misunderstanding of emotions. Emotions are nothing more than signals. They're nothing more than information. From the limbic system of the brain, which has evolved more than 240 million years ago, dogs have limbic systems, squirrels have limbic systems, and so do humans. The limbic system senses the things that are going on from the baser parts of the brain that are below your level of consciousness and translates that information into emotional data.
Which is a physiological experience.
Exactly. And there's not very many
emotions. You can
emotions.
observe, right. Okay, well, let's do that.
Yeah.
But to be concrete, you can observe emotions.
Totally. That's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be a signal to you that something should be avoided or approached.
And sometimes others.
Yeah.
right?
For sure.
Yeah, but to avoid it approach, the avoid approach.
Threats and opportunities.
Yeah, that's right. You're in line with Professor Damasio's approach on how emotions and feelings work, right? Like you guys are in harmony there.
Yeah.
And
most emotion researchers understand this in the same way, that emotions are not good or bad. They're positive and negative on the basis of what you're trying to ascertain, so you have appropriate information to make decisions.
that's it.
Yeah.
So a handful of emotions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so will you walk me through what those handful are for you?
So researchers disagree on the positive emotions, but don't disagree on the negative emotions.
Yep.
Everybody feels like a very special, unique flower when it comes to their emotional life. But it turns out we have the same repertoire. So your emotions are kind of like stocking a kitchen with the same equipment and ingredients, but everybody makes different recipes. So that's how.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how it works. So
Okay.
we all have, the same ingredients in our kitchen. I like, making Indian food, and you like, baking desserts, but we all have the same basic stuff. The negative emotions that nobody disagrees on fundamentally are fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. And there are different structures in the limbic system that govern each one of these emotions. So the amygdala of the brain governs fear and anger. The insular cortex governs governs disgust. And the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex governs sadness. That's what it's all about. I mean, you're supposed to feel pain because when something happens, you should be aversive to something that appears to be a threat. And you need a signal that gets your attention now, and you want it to go away.
Where do you put shame, guilt, and jealousy?
Those shame, guilt, and jealousy are complex emotions that mix these other things.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to. So I do the way that I teach it.
Yeah,
like a 101. Somebody that really needs a base level is I go 4 primary.
Oh, okay.
And this will be
4 primary negative.
No, yeah, I even simplify it even more.
Okay.
Okay, so I go 3 negative. I don't include disgust. Okay. I understand. I am in agreement with you, but I'm stripping it down to like this even more basic.
Because you're talking about human behavior, and disgust is a little bit less relevant for how you're going to be a leader.
Correct.
Because you're not going to disgust is about not eating that thing in the back of your fridge.
That's right. Yeah.
Or something on the bottom of your shoe.
It's and you can see somebody when they're in a moment of disgust.
Yeah. No, the problem is when you treat somebody else with disgust, particularly when you're a leader, then your behavior, you mix it with anger, it becomes contempt.
I was going to say disdain.
Horrible leadership.
Yes,
so that's the one case in which disgust is relevant.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I leave that one for shame, guilt, and jealousy as this other kind of thing that's important to pay attention to, but not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I just add, so I do them as scales.
Yeah.
So I say, imagine 1 to 10, and there's 4 scales.
Yeah.
And the 4th scale would be happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And if we put each of those words on the median, the 5, and there's a 10 and there's a 1, okay, on each scale. So let's call it the anger scale. Anger is a 5.
Right.
Okay. What word would you put as a 10 for anger on the scale? So
rage, whatever.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So
fury.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So 10, 9, one of those 2 words is up there. And then what's the smallest amount of anger?
Annoyance.
Okay. Perfect. So then I ask you to fill out that whole list. So there's lots of words. So now I'm going to like step 2 of emotional intelligence, have some sort of nuance in it. And then the fun part of this is, hey, why don't you go to your partner or your teammate and have them do it as well? And you'll find that like pissed for some people is like a 7, and for other people it's like a 2.
Yeah.
And that calibration is the art of the calibrating here is like really important. Yeah,
that's really helpful.
Really
that's really helpful for emotional self-management, because what you're doing is you're taking awareness of emotions and you're moving the experience of those emotions into the prefrontal cortex, which is the bumper of brain tissue, 30% of your brain by weight, right behind your forehead.
Yeah.
And what happens is if you leave your limbic system in charge of the emotions, your emotions will manage you. And if you move the experience doing exactly the kind of stuff that you're talking about, which is also known as metacognition,
that's right,
awareness of your emotions, thinking about thinking, then you will be governing your emotional life from your prefrontal cortex, because that's the C-suite of your brain.
That's it.
You want the CEO to be making decisions about the company and not, the people who don't have full information.
I'm so stoked to hear you vibe this way, or explain it this way, because as a Harvard professor in the business school,
what the heck is going on in the business school?
You're not supposed to be this fluid here.
Yeah.
It's the imagination. The cynic is like, okay, you get that happiness is trendy and cool, and then you did some interesting research and you cobbled together some points of view and some research and sold some stories and sold a bunch of books. But this is fluid.
Yeah.
You're fluid on both anatomy, chemistry, emotion, feelings, behaviors, thinking strategies. Like you're really fluid here.
You have to be. You have to be to make this stuff really, really work. And of course, you know, because you've been working at the highest levels of performance in business and sports.
Yeah.
And that means you have to understand anatomy. And basically, the way that it works is this. All the interesting questions about happiness or human performance don't come from science. They come from philosophy. They come from history. They come from art. They come from spirituality. So you better know that stuff. Mm-hmm. Then you need to understand the mechanism of causation, which means you need to know neuroscience.
Yeah.
So it's 20% philosophy and then 30% neuroscience. Then about 40% is going to be the social science, which exposes ideas to empirical scrutiny to see, does it work, does it not work? What are the habits that can actually be implemented? And the last is management science, where you actually take it onto the field when you're standing next to Coach Carroll.
Management science is like, I've never heard anyone frame it with those four.
20, 30, 40, 10.
Yeah, that's cool.
Ultimately. And if you can't do all four.
Wait, is this opinion? Is this?
That's how I teach.
Yeah. So
that's how my classes are structured for high performers.
Okay, great. So this is like a working model for you, untested, theoretical working model for you. Is that?
I've changed the sliders on the proportions to see whether or not the performance levels I could elicit would be higher or lower.
Yeah. Okay.
And it turns out that when I change them materially, I either don't give a good grounding for the reasons we should care about this, or I don't explain the anatomy properly so people trust it, or I don't have enough evidence to get evidence-backed conclusions. And worst of all, when I don't have the management science, so I can't implement.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to emotions, but where are you putting the intersection of psychology and behavior when you speak to high performers about being the very best?
Part of it is they want to know that there's evidence that these things work. So this is one of the things, I mean, it's perfectly, it's really helpful to have a PhD.
Yeah.
Because it takes years and years and it's an apprenticeship in linear thinking. And you get a good BS meter when it comes to what the research actually says. Yeah. And what you are is somebody who's trustworthy. So that's where it comes in. So the social science that we talk about here is super important so that you can explain it in layman's terms and in a way that's trustworthy so that they know you know what you're talking about. You don't just have a pet theory.
Yeah, the American Psychological Association, I'll get the dates wrong, but it feels like it's probably like 7 or 8 years ago, said, or maybe it's 6 years ago, somewhere in that range, said, listen, when you do grounded research or you do some sort of research, you also need to become skilled at publishing the so what.
Yeah.
Right? So like make it simple, which is what you've been doing for a long time, right?
That's the comparative advantage at the end of the day.
Yeah. Can you make it simple, digestible, something that can be actioned?
Yeah. And I couldn't have done that at 35. I mean, I was writing academic journal articles that were mathematical theorems. I was doing work on genetic algorithms, which is early artificial intelligence that was so sophisticated that I can't read the math today.
Come on.
No, totally. And now I have an audience of 500,000 readers a week in The Atlantic where I'm explaining relatively nuanced science that I'm not actually performing, but I'm interpreting for an audience of smart, interested people that are doing important things like playing sports and running companies. Mm-hmm. That's my goal. Now, when I was 35, I had a lot of fluid intelligence that made it possible for me to participate innovatively in that literature. And now I have a lot of crystallized intelligence where I can synthetically take these ideas and say, this is what it says. Here's why it matters. Here's how you use it. And that's what you do too.
Awesome. Yeah.
On your show every week.
Okay. All right. So let's go back. You've got 4.
Yeah.
The 3 plus disgust.
Yeah, exactly.
And then where do you go on the favorable?
The favorable, the positive, negative emotions, the positive primary emotions are joy, which is usually tapping the ventral tegmental area of the brain. It might come from your beloved saying, I love you. And it might come from, an 8 ball of cocaine because that will hit the same pleasure centers of the brain over again. You get a sense of joy, that ebullience that you get, the reward, the positive reward. Interest, which is a primary positive emotion that gives you an evolutionary advantage because you learn more, you get ahead as a species. And some people would put surprise in there as well, because most surprise is actually positive.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes surprise is really negative, but the whole point of surprise is evolved to something gets your attention so that you'll be out of equilibrium and you're able to react to something. And so, but,
it's more neutral than it is. It's more your psychology that would interpret if that is
positive or negative.
Yeah. And I hesitated on, I don't know why I said the word favorable, because I was hesitating on positive, negative, because I wanted to talk to you about that. I tend to do even one level below that, which is like difficult and easy emotions.
Yeah, that's fair. But what we do know is not good and bad.
It's not good and
bad.
Right and wrong.
Good and bad feelings.
It's
a wrong terminology, and that's one of the reasons that people struggle so much today.
Yeah,
is because
I get a little bit of rash around positive and negative framing in general because of the positive psychology. Let's hold hands and be great, together and kumbaya and everything's okay, and just be positive in your thoughts. Like it's not. I don't think a skilled psychologist in the world of positive psychology would say that's not what it is. I understand, but there's a social thing that's happened around positive.
Yeah, you could say
toxic positivity
emotions and avoidance emotions. That might be more. That might be a better way of doing it.
But the clumping of those, I agree with the clumping. I really like what you've done there.
Yeah, and the surprise one is really interesting because I work on surprise because I'm really interested. I've worked with a bunch of comedians, and I'm really interested in what makes something funny, and it's always surprise. Surprise makes something funny. So the way that all jokes work is you go down a particular path, and then you suddenly jerk people away from their assumption, and the surprise makes you laugh.
Got it.
In every case.
That's why I find comedians so thrilling to be around. The level of intelligence and insight, and how quick they are to be able to jerk somebody around. Yeah. I find them this beautiful balance between like amazing to be around and slightly dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? Because you get pulled into the tornado quickly and all of a sudden it's like, wow, like I have no idea how to get my footing here.
And we actually have been able to do fMRI studies. I mean, I say that in the profession, I didn't do it myself, but there are fMRI studies that show what's happening in the brain, what part of the brain is engaged. You're engaging the surprise centers of the limbic system. It's incredible.
This is interesting. This is great for me. Like I don't know what the surprise centers are. Like, are you fluid there?
The anatomy is complicated. I've written about it and I don't remember. I actually wrote a column on the anatomy of a joke. Yeah. I mean, literally the neuroanatomy of a joke, and I don't remember it. I can actually, we can find it and put it in the show notes. Yeah, that's great. One of my Atlanta columns. But what happens?
Hold on real quick. I just appreciate that honesty.
Yeah.
In the way that you just did that.
Oh.
Allows you
not to make up. It's the
I just really appreciate that. I think that is something that we in our world need more of. Like I've studied that a lot. It's actually escaping me.
I can't remember. I can't remember what it is. Right. And it's like I can figure it out. I can go find it, but I can't remember it right now. Really so there's no reason to to take a stab at it.
But I really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks.
That's really cool.
And what'll happen is that you start to become path dependent when somebody tells you a story. And you start tracking with it. And you can actually see in the brain-to-brain coupling studies where people are in 2 fMRI machines, and you'll see that when you tell somebody a story that is very personal, that the listener's brainwaves will get ahead. And so this makes you highly path dependent. And then it's like record scratch. That's really, really funny. So dumb, stupid jokes. I mean, let's see an example.
I walked into a bar.
Yeah.
And it hurt.
When
I didn't do it, did I? That was not good enough, was it? Okay.
That's not bad. Yeah. When I die, I've thought about how I want to go. And I've thought about it a lot. I'm a happiness specialist. And I think I want to die peacefully in my sleep like my grandfather, not screaming in terror like his passengers.
So I thought I was going to be really clever. This was like, 15 years ago, and I was going to open a keynote and or I was going to do a keynote, and I wanted an opening joke because I read somewhere that jokes are a good way to start.
Yeah, you read someplace and you're starting to do a lot of speeches for the first time. And you got this advice.
Like, what am I going to do? So I made up a joke.
Yeah.
And I'll give it to you now just for the sake of like silliness here. And so imagine there's, a couple thousand people in the audience, and I'm on stage, and I walk out. And people know I've already been introduced.
Right.
And I say, I want to tell you a story. World Championship, one of the most intense environments. The emotions were palpable. It was like so intense. It's pregame. We're about to go out as a team. The readiness is real. That vibrance that you can't quite describe is happening inside the room. You can feel it. And then all of a sudden I hear, don't blow it. This is not one to blow. Don't go out there and look stupid. And then I hear someone say, and then I hear, this is a contract year. Better get this thing right. And then I hear, oh, this might be too big for you. This might be too big. And then 6'8" lineman walks over to me, puts his arm around me, and he says, hey, Mike, you're going to be okay, man. You did not get the joke. Damn it. They didn't get the joke either. The idea that was in my head.
Yeah.
And so,
I know. I mean, of course, it was a little man inside your little man inside your head.
Thank you for not laughing at my bad joke.
No.
I really appreciate it.
I like it. And it's perilous business.
It's as awkward as it gets now, right?
No. When you tell a joke in public, it's really hard. I mean, it's a really hard thing to do.
I have such respect for it.
Oh my gosh. And the telling. So a lot of people, they don't know how to give a speech. And so speeches, as you and I both know, you have to break them up. You have to modularize them because people can't stay on the bike.
That's correct.
For more than about 6 to 8 minutes. So every 6 to 8 minutes, you got to give people a rest to get off the bike. And there's different ways to do it. A story about your kids is a good way to do it. But it's all a pretext to give people a rest before they get back on the bike again. Or to tell them about a study that's blowing your mind. I just read the study. It's amazing. It's all made up. Or to tell a joke. Right. So I was at the Aspen Ideas Festival and I was giving a talk. It was a long talk. It was an hour lecture on the science of love. Right.
Hey, yeah.
And I'd gotten to my 6 to 8 minute mark. And so just organically, I told this story. Right. And I thought it was pretty funny. Right. And I said, so, that safetyism is so virulent in our society today. And it's so different from my generation when I was in the 70s, growing up in Seattle. I was 11 years old and I had a paper route at 4:30 in the morning. And it turned out I lived in this working class neighborhood that Ted Bundy had been marauding through. And so my mother was very worried because, serial killers are all about, apparently, so she thought that I shouldn't keep the route. And my dad, who was a brilliant biostatistician, to defend my ability to keep the route because he was on my side. He said, honey, I've been looking at the data on serial killers and, Arthur doesn't fit the core demographic, so we should let him keep the route. Right? About this whole thing. You laugh. They didn't laugh. The whole time. And I'm thinking, God, man, I just blew that. What did I do? And so afterward, there's people coming up saying, thanks for the talk and the whole thing. Yeah. And I look at the back of the line and Jerry Seinfeld is in the line. I kid you not.
Stop.
He's in the line. He's a super cool dude and he's super nice. And he waited and he got to the front of the line and he said, good job. And I said, I got to ask you. I mean, it's like, why did my joke fall
what a
flat?
moment.
I know.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, it's simple. You shouldn't have said Ted Bundy. You should have just said a serial killer. Because when you personalized it, they saw his face. They saw the face of evil and it wasn't funny anymore. And I'm like, huh. And so the next night, I just said serial killer and it brought the house down.
Seriously?
He was exactly right. I mean, the guy's a genius.
Yeah.
But he knew the one word that I needed to take out to make that thing actually work. That, by the way, is mastery.
That is mastery. Yeah. And he probably saw it right when it was happening.
Yeah, no, he's like,
he was almost there. Yeah, right. Oh my God. Oh, that is what a moment. That is awesome.
I know. I actually, for one brief moment, got, coached
by the legend
jokes,
himself.
by the legend himself, by the goat.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so let's go. We hit some emotions. We didn't get to feelings yet. Mm-hmm. And the punchline there is emotions are observable, feelings are private. You have to ask people about their feelings. Right. How do you stitch those two together? And how do you tie this back to happiness, the approach to happiness?
So I typically spend a lot less time on feelings, and part of the reason is because the personal part of it is not as relevant for emotional self-management the way that I tend to talk about it. Mm-hmm. The way that I talk about feelings, however, with my students is to say, don't make the mistake of thinking that your feelings are happiness. They'll define happiness on the first day of class because I cold call them, say, what's happiness? You're in a happiness class. You must know what it is. And they're like, it's the feeling I get when I'm with the people I love, or it's how I feel when I'm doing the things that I enjoy. And I said, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful definition. It's wrong. Feelings are not happiness any more than the smell of your turkey is your Thanksgiving dinner. Your internal feelings are evidence of happiness. Happiness is definable. Happiness includes full human experiences. Happiness has a scientific basis behind it, and happiness is something you can get better at. So buckle up.
Very cool. So you are not suggesting that happiness is an emotion.
No.
And you're not suggesting that it's a narrow feeling.
Exactly.
A time fleeting.
It's not a feeling. It's not an emotional experience. On the contrary.
Okay. So I should rearrange the way I'm thinking about those scales and not have one of those three be happiness as a scale.
I don't. And the reason is because that's, I think of, I write about happiness as a behavioral scientist as kind of like the way I would write about food if I were a nutritionist, which is to say I would focus on the macronutrients and not on the food writ large. If I want you to be healthier, I'm going to look at your macros.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, oh man, you're way over the top on carbs, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's get your protein and fat in the right place, and let's start talking about the quality of your macronutrients, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing is true for happiness, basically. Happiness is a combination of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. Enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. Those are the macronutrients of happiness per se. Yeah, and that has a ton of suffering in it, and that has a full set of life experiences in it.
Yeah, you're borrowing from some well-tested, ancient philosophical positions there.
Because once again, all the interesting questions come from philosophy.
Yeah, I understand. I agree too.
And not from, what you and I were doing to get our PhDs.
Yeah.
Which is, I think I found some data. So that must contain the most interesting question.
No one ever read, Yeah, right. When you think about just how remarkable it is that we're still talking about some of the greats, that, and some of them didn't actually write their stuff down.
Oh yeah, Socrates didn't write a word.
That's right.
It was Jesus, recorded maybe by Plato.
Neither did Jesus.
No.
Yeah.
It was remembered by his friends.
Yeah, and they were wild ones.
They were wild ones.
His 12 were wild ones.
That was a cosmic rager.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That was the bunch that I feel like I would have been part of. So
I know. They had to give up a lot, though.
They did. They did give up a lot. Everything
all but one
actually
was martyred.
All but one.
Only St. John was not martyred. Died, and
oh God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, every single one was martyred. All one died. Judas died, but his replacement was
Judas killed himself.
Judas killed himself.
Yeah.
Or he fell down and broke open his head. It's in different gospels. It's
described
in different ways. Yeah. And then Matthias took his place.
Yeah.
And of the 12, including the replacement, 11 were martyred. I mean, the odds were bad.
Yeah, right. I mean, people say life is unprecedented, how difficult life is. And I go, hey man, the dark ages were really dark.
Yeah, you want to know how good life
is now?
The
Roman Empire was pretty
heavy. Think
about
a toothache.
Yeah, right. That would kill you.
That would kill you, or at least make you completely miserable for like 4 months.
Yeah, right. Now you just 24 hours later.
Doc,
yeah, right.
Make it go away.
Okay, good. So then, all right. So teach a little bit on happiness, and maybe what can we do better?
Yeah.
To be
so happy? I focus on different elements, the different macronutrients, depending on the people I'm talking to. So the people listening to this show are strivers.
Yes.
100% strivers. There's nobody's like, yeah, man, I'm just gonna slack off with my life and listening to Finding Mastery.
That is not us.
No,
yeah, right.
It is not. And so when I'm talking to strivers, like you and me and all of our listeners, I ordinarily talk about the macronutrients that tend to be deficient.
The 4? Are these the 4?
No, these are the 3. The macronutrients are enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning.
Okay.
That's in areas in which it's harder for strivers than for other people.
Mm.
Strivers have a lot going for them. Their lives are pretty good, but they often lack enjoyment. Mm-hmm. And the reason they lack enjoyment is because they're actually not doing the things that that are required. They actually don't have the self-discipline to do things that bring enjoyment. On the contrary, they've learned they should never consume, they should always invest. Invest. That's the reason that strivers have a tendency to workaholism, success addiction, self-objectification, which they obviate, they eviscerate enjoyment. Enjoyment is pleasure plus people plus memory. That's how it works. It's not pleasure. Pleasure is limbic.
Mhm.
Pleasure is an animal sensation. People who pursue pleasure as a goal always end badly. I don't have to tell any Finding Mastery listeners that.
That's
they
right.
know that.
Yeah.
But you need sources of things that are pleasurable to you and add people and memory such that you can discipline and subjugate those searches for pleasure and have it be an enriching part of your life.
So when you put those three together, I can see how to put two of them together.
Yeah.
People and pleasure,
Mhm.
like a great meal and conversation,
Totally.
right?
Mhm.
Memory is that call in that moment, calling up times from before that were great? Or are you talking about programming memory so that at a later time, this is an action, I don't know if you're familiar with this approach, but purposely manipulating the coding of an experience to be favorable.
Memorable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that later when you're in a moment of duress, suffering, to fill in the blanks, that you have programmed this thing to come forward in a favorable way.
That's right.
Yeah. And
That's where enjoyment is most intense. Is where you basically say, I'm going to do something that I like. I'm going to do it with somebody I care about. And I'm going to do it in a way that I can continue to get the positive experience.
okay, very cool. So much so that I agree with this, not knowing this piece of your work, is that I, every year I do the year of. And it's something that we do here at Finding Mastery is like, do some discernment, do some internal work, and
Right.
think about what is a main theme for you this year,
Right.
the year of.
Right.
It could be anything. Like
Right.
there's zero judgment, as we would both nod our heads to.
Mhm.
Uh,
Well, not zero judgment.
As long as it's approved
This is the
by.
year of crashing cars. You know? This
Well,
is the year of shoplifting.
Okay, well, there's okay. So in 2023, it was the year of play,
Yeah.
and I needed to commit to playing more.
Yeah. Because you wanted to get better
At what
that
you just
macroeconomic,
described.
that macronutrient
That's
of
right.
happiness.
That's right, and I knew I needed it. I need it now. So
Your skill level needed to be
2024,
higher
yes, the skill level at play,
at enjoyment.
of play. And you're saying enjoyment.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that word, and well, I did, but I didn't put it there. And then in 2024, I had to run it back.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite get it right in 365 days. I need still to play even more. And so the panda is my muse.
Nice.
Yeah. So I don't know if they're enjoying life or not, but the idea that they can just roll around and have fun, carefree, I need more of that.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
going to take
intense.
more than a year, dude. I mean,
I
look, you're a
appreciate
super high performer.
Yeah, I appreciate
You're
that.
super self-disciplined.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get good at a fundamental discipline in life in a year.
I appreciate that.
It can't be.
I never had that insight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how long did it take you to get your PhD?
Yeah.
5 years?
No. Well, yes.
Yeah. I
If
mean,
it
it's
was
like that was
4 plus whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you had to, I mean, it takes.
I went to the big arc of school.
Yeah,
not just PhD.
right. It takes a long time to get good at something.
Yeah.
You know, the people today, they want to get good at something. And if you think you're good at play after 1 month playing, like on vacation, then you're suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect. You're not as good as you think you are, in other words.
The ones that think they're really special and really good at something are the ones that know the least.
Yeah.
And the ones that know so much
Uh-huh.
are the ones that actually present as that they don't understand it.
And
you
the
know?
fact that you got to year 2 and said, I need more work,
Yeah.
was evidence that you were making tons of progress.
So I'm not in a Dunning-Kruger effect.
You're out of Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah.
My guess is that like a couple of months into the year of play, you're like, this is awesome. I'm pretty good at this. Right. And by the end, you're like, oh
my God. I didn't know what happened.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, my wife is great. She's like, are we still in the year of play? So we've got this thing is when either of us get really intense, and we're both very intense.
Yeah.
When we start to get really intense, my son will add in, or I'll do it like, okay, hold on. We're still in the circle of love, right? And it's just this code like, yeah, we're getting really intense. Like, okay. It's a fun way for us to like shorthand the intensity.
It's a safe
so
word.
we can breathe, right? Yeah. But it's meant to be a joke.
Yeah, I
Like
got it.
I'm thrashing and she's like, you're okay. You're still in the circle of love. Keep thrashing. And it's a way to.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
That's good.
So
that's important. And so you've just given a perfect example to the listeners
for enjoyment
and how it's hard and it requires work and it doesn't come naturally. Like any skill.
How do you upskill enjoyment? What do you do?
It's hard for me to do, to be sure, but I need help. when it comes to that. So, for me, the easy thing is, when I don't drink any alcohol, for example, because I would do it too much. I did. I was a musician. I drank too much alcohol.
Right. Yeah.
Is the whole point, because I was trying to short circuit it by doing pleasure, hitting the pleasure centers of my brain over and over and over and over again. So what I have to do is to make sure I'm around the people that I really trust and the people that I really like, and then discipline myself to not work, and then do something that is pleasurable with the people that I love in a way that I'm going to remember.
Does music still do that for you?
Yeah, I love music. I don't play music at all.
You don't?
I only listen to music. I love listening to
music.
music.
So playing music does not bring you enjoyment?
No.
It was too much work for too long.
Yeah, for sure. No, that would be basically, a lot of former professional athletes don't play the game anymore.
That's right.
Because it was just, I can't play at a high level. I'm just reminding myself that I'm out of shape.
That's right.
That's what it comes down to. A lot of former football players play some golf.
Yeah, right.
Right. They don't get on the field and try to play football.
And their identity is not wrapped up in that as it once was. Which, again, performance-based identity is a toxic pill. So,
that's self-objectification.
That is exactly it. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a success addiction, which is a primary addiction that implicates the neurochemistry, the same neurochemistry that's involved in any addiction. But I succeeded. I got a pat on the head. Gives you the same amount of dopamine as a bump of cocaine.
Amen. And what do you do to kids that do something well? How do you support them? Do you say attaboy or attagirl, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's a good question, because my kids are high performers, and my kids are all pretty intense in their own way. The key thing is not to talk about how you don't compliment your kid for being smart.
That's right.
You compliment your kid for being a hard worker.
Something they can control.
A virtue.
Yeah.
And virtue
something
is
they can influence.
Yeah. Not endowment, only virtue.
Not endowment. What you came into the world with.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you're so smart, that'll make them feel good. But that's like saying, you're so awesome, you were born rich.
Yeah. And it also does a thing. You're so smart does another thing that's more insidious, which is, oh, they think I'm smart, so I better not say anything stupid.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm about to say something. I don't know if it's going to be smart or not.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to like it. So I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be overly aggressive to make sure that I don't seem like I don't know.
Right.
And so, there's a insidious little game inside the game that happens for folks. Yeah.
Complimenting endowments is almost always a problem for child development.
I've never heard endowment. It's a fun way to say it. Yeah.
Or windfall, depending on how you want it.
You're born on third base and you
think I really admire you for having a good facial structure.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
Mike, I admire the fact that you've got beautiful hair.
Yeah,
I admire, and that's it's very meritorious.
Come up, so maybe
it may be a soft spot for me.
That's so good. Okay, so go back to the three. We got enjoyment.
Yeah, satisfaction.
Satisfaction
is really, really important in one particular way for high performers. So for low performers, I have to talk about the fact that satisfaction only comes after you've struggled. Satisfaction is the joy that you get after struggle. You can't get it without struggle.
Unlock that it's like, oh, that's
See, we want to suffer. We're a funny species. My dog doesn't want to suffer for his achievements. No. He would eat lying down if he could. Right? But we get sweetness only after we suffer. So that's the reason you tell your kids when they're little, don't eat before dinner. Not because it's not good for them, but because you want them to be hungry when they get to dinner. So they'll enjoy their dinner, which is a source of satisfaction. And you want them to learn that satisfaction, which is a part of happiness, comes when you're suffering. And you relieve the suffering.
That's super.
So that's but you're not getting, you say to them, it's like, they're like, why not? You say, because it's bad for you. No, that's a lie. What you're saying to them is, I want you to suffer. But you don't say that. But you do want them to suffer. You want them to defer their gratification,
right?
Which is not just the secret to high performance, which it is, but it's a secret to satisfaction. And that's what low performers need to hear. What high performers need to hear is
what low performers need to hear
deferral of gratification will lead to greater happiness.
The marshmallow effect.
It's the marshmallow effect.
Yeah.
It is the marshmallow test, the famous study, which I'm sure everybody who listened to Fighting Mastery knows the marshmallow study.
Yeah,
right?
they don't. And if they don't right now, they're going, oh my God, I'm the one.
I know. Look at Walter Mischel from Stanford University, 1968. Okay. So what high performers need to hear about is not the deferral of gratification, because they're not eating the marshmallow.
That's right.
Their marshmallow is sitting there for days and years and decades on it.
Yeah.
What they need to understand is the greater tyranny, which is that satisfaction doesn't last.
Oh,
So yeah, this
yes,
is right. Okay, so and that leads to the hedonic treadmill for every single high performer. The hedonic treadmill is I want to keep the feeling of satisfaction, but I can't because of homeostasis. My brain is going to return to its emotional baseline. It always does. It has to, because that's what emotions are for, to keep you ready for approach and avoidance, for opportunities and threats. It's not so you can feel something awesome. Mother Nature does not care if you're happy. She wants you to survive and pass on your genes. She has two goals for Mike and Arthur and everybody else listening. Okay. So if that's the case, we will be fooled as a high performer into thinking if I just get that thing, the famous arrival fallacy, where progress is good, so arrival's better.
I just get the gold medal.
Which is why gold medalists often suffer a crippling clinical depression in the month after winning the medal, is because they think the satisfaction is going to come and stay, and it doesn't. It's Mick Jagger was wrong. It's not true. You can't get no satisfaction. You can't keep no satisfaction.
Yes.
And that's what every high performer needs to understand. So the way to deal with that is to understand that you need a more sophisticated measure of satisfaction, which is not getting what you want. That's not satisfaction. That's not the formula for satisfaction. The formula for lasting satisfaction is your haves, the things that you have, divided by your wants. Haves divided by wants. You need not just to manage your haves as a high performer, you also need to manage your wants, your expectations. That is the critical discipline that comes for somebody who can be at the highest level of performance and not be miserable.
So it's be okay with what you have. And then how do you manage the wants?
You manage the wants by making sure that you are fully cognizant of the fact that you have cravings and desires, moving them metacognitively from your limbic system into your prefrontal cortex. So I do a reverse bucket list. High performers always have these bucket lists to motivate themselves. I have cravings and I'm 60 years old and I still have these stupid ambitions because I'm weak and I'm shallow, just like every other man.
Yes.
And I write down those cravings and desires, and I say, I will not be managed by these cravings and desires, and I cross them out. Not because I don't want them to be gone, but because I want to be the one who's in charge.
There you go.
And it sets you free.
It's an interesting
really
way
set you
for,
free.
like, on the agency discussion.
Totally.
So that's what you're doing. You're saying, look at these cravings,
right,
these things that you think are going to bring satisfaction. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
And
that's going to satisfaction that's going to last if you get it, which it won't.
It will not.
No.
Yeah. So that's the fallacy.
Right. That's the fallacy.
That it's temporary, it's state specific, and it's fleeting, which is typically how I think about pleasure. And but you're putting satisfaction in that same bucket.
Yeah. The joy that you're going to get. So joy, which is a primary positive emotion, which homeostatically returns to baseline because it can't stay around. You can't have a ventral tegmental area that's lit up like a Christmas tree forever.
Right.
You'll be so distracted. You'll get eaten by a tiger.
And we don't trust those people.
No.
Because it's like they're dealing in some weird fantasy land that's not real. Like get down here and make sure you're scanning the world too for the saber tooth.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Very cool.
So that's important. And another way to think about this for high performers is high performers feel like they're self-created, right? And to a very large extent, they are.
Do you feel like you were the underdog or the sure thing?
I was never a sure thing.
Yeah.
I mean, because I was doing all kinds of things that had no family background in. And I was just taking the shot.
Yeah.
Taking the shot. All entrepreneurs who have some degree of success also have failures and always feel like, might not work out. Might not work out. I'm still waiting to see if it's going to work out.
You know what's crazy is that fear for some is electric.
It's a motivation. It's not a good source of motivation. It's a bad fuel.
Yeah. And I was just going to add to it is that when you take that and this, you were calling it the hedonic treadmill, but I was going to offer another idea here, which is that when you're highly skilled at something, highly motivated, and you're operating in a dangerous environment, the edge keeps getting a little bit higher to get the stimulus required to have that fleeting sense of satisfaction.
That's because dopamine is,
and it becomes exponentially more dangerous.
You become habituated.
As your skill, that's exactly the word. As your skill increases, you push further.
Right.
Satisfaction is fleeting. You push further. Now you're in a very dangerous territory where marginal fractional mistakes are incredibly costly.
Exactly.
And there's an addiction to that whole thing.
It all comes down to addiction. Remember, psychology is biology.
Yeah.
And that's why you need to understand the biology.
Well, I don't know psychology, biology. I think that psychology is the interface for biology. Is how I think about it.
But psychology, there's biology behind everything that we're talking about here. And so people think of addiction as being a purely psychological phenomenon. No, on the contrary. I mean, anything you get addicted to involves dopamine.
Yeah, I mean, Descartes tried to pull the thoughts and brain apart, body and mind apart, and it's
He's
not
a dualist.
Yeah, but it doesn't. We know it's easier to talk about it that way, but we are embedded.
Yeah,
we are interactions.
And even if you believe that the body and soul are instantiated in different ways, we have to still recognize that many of the psychological phenomena that affect us in our lives, they have a biological basis that comes from evolution.
Yeah,
that we're still human beings that have evolved since the Pleistocene so that we can be successful. And a lot of the motivation for the things that we experience are anachronistic or not, but they have to do with they have an explanation that we need to understand. So we become habituated to levels of dopamine in our brain, which give us anticipation of reward. So dopamine as a neuromodulator, we often hear that it's a pleasure chemical. It's not. It's an anticipation of reward chemical. That's why it's implicated in all addiction. It makes you say, I want it. I want the cigarette. I want the cocaine. I want the pornography. I want the payoff at the slot machine, or I want the deal.
Yeah, I want the praise from the stage, or I want the praise from an app or whatever.
I want the admiration of strangers.
That's right.
I want another 1,000,000 followers, whatever crazy thing it is, but it's the same thing. And the first thing that a person who has 1,000,000 followers wants is another 1,000,000 followers. And 1,000,000 followers is for losers.
I mean, this crazy rock that's spinning in the universe that we're somehow gravitationally pulled to, in this body that we have no idea how we've gotten here, and this made up language that we're speaking. I love to put those three ridiculous ideas together. Like, my mentor said to me at a very young age, he said, Mike, you really matter to people in their lives. Like, it's really cool. I see it. And I was like, wow, thank you. And he says, I also want you to keep another thing in mind. I said, what's that? And he said, it's been around a really long time. Keep that in mind. In the big scheme of things, you don't matter very much at all.
And will be forgotten.
Yeah. Can you hold those two things together for the rest of your life?
I know.
Yeah. So
I know. It's really amazing. And it was really wonderful to feel the admiration of somebody that you admire. It's a really wonderful thing. But it is patently true that it's senseless for us to think that we're going to have some sort of undying legacy. It's senseless for us to do that, which is one of the reasons that actually all work and no play is a bad strategy.
Right.
Hence the year of play.
Hence the year of play. I better enjoy it while we have it.
So satisfaction is a funny thing, right? And satisfaction, how I talk about satisfaction depends on whether I'm talking to a slacker or a striver.
That's cool that you have two ways into
totally. Because they have different pathologies.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then meaning.
This is the hard one. Mm-hmm. Meaning is the hard one because everybody listening to us who's very self-disciplined, can go for a long time without enjoyment and a long time without satisfaction, but you can't go 10 minutes without meaning. Now, meaning is not the same thing as purpose. Meaning has three parts to it. That's the why of your life. You need to have a working reason for understanding it. You need to know what the why of your life is, or at least be making progress toward that. And it really has three parts: coherence, why things happen; purpose, which is goals and direction; and significance, which is that your life matters. That's the three things that you actually need. Now, I have a diagnostic test that I give people to see whether or not they have a meaning crisis. And the meaning crisis is no joke. I mean, you and I are going to be okay on this, but the main reason that I found in my own research that people in their 20s are suffering so much is because they don't have a strong sense of meaning and they're not even looking. And there's a pretty interesting biological theory about that comes from Ian McGilchrist in his work on hemispheric lateralization of the brain.
Yes.
Where the right side of the brain is dedicated toward meaning questions, and the left side is toward distraction and technocratic pursuits, analysis, right? The modern world is actually forcing us into the left side of our brain, and we're not spending enough time biologically in the part of the brain where we can address and answer meaning questions. And the result is we feel less and less and less meaning, and emptier and emptier and emptier. I'm writing a book on that right now.
Nihilism.
It's a problem, but it's a physiological problem, and that means we need to simplify our lives and stay away from the things that distract us, that fritter away our time, so that we can get back to the right. Back to the right hemisphere.
That's Nice nod to biology and modern modernity.
Yeah,
if you
put
will.
down the phone.
Yeah,
put
right.
down the screen. Stop scrolling. Be bored. Go be bored. You're on the train. Put away the screen. Fold your hands in your lap. Look out the window. Go to the default mode network, which is going to send you back to the right side of your brain. It's going to be very uncomfortable.
This is why the counter rotation of mindfulness has been so important for so many people in the last handful of years, let alone the last 2,600 years.
Totally. Totally.
So,
and that's why it's very hard. So the questions of meaning that are diagnostic are, why are you alive? And for what would you be willing to die right now?
Oh, those are the big ones you asked.
Yeah, because that gets coherence, purpose, and significance all in one handy dandy place. And I can tell diagnostically when I'm working with young adults or clients or whoever, whether or not there's a meaning crisis I have to cope with. And high performers and low performers are absolutely both open to a meaning crisis.
To say the two again, why are you alive?
Why are you alive? And that might mean who created you or for what purpose.
Yeah.
And for what would you joyfully give your life at this moment? In other words, why were you born and for what would you be willing to not be alive? Why are you alive and for what would you be willing to not be alive?
I've got a long list on the second one. The first one's pretty simple for me.
What's the simple one? Tell me number one for you.
Why am I here?
Yeah.
Why am I alive?
Why are you alive?
I don't go to like God's creation. I don't do that. I go to what I think my purpose is to help people live in the present moment more often.
You are alive to serve.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
For what would you give your life at this moment?
Oh, I mean, I have a long list.
But tell me the top three.
I'll do my wife and son.
Your wife,
for them
the
to
people
have
that you love, your people.
Yeah, for my people to,
you
but
die
not just for them. But not just for them to live, for them to live a great life.
Right. Would you die for your country?
No.
Would you die for your beliefs?
No. That doesn't mean waver.
That's not wrong. These are your answers. I mean,
I want to qualify that though.
I want to know if you know, because sometimes people say, I don't know. And that's.
Yeah, no, my beliefs are quite clear, many of them, and I'm really open to more beliefs. They are not the reason to die. The application of beliefs are a reason to die, but not the beliefs in themselves.
Do you think you'd die for a stranger?
It is complicated for me. I think without my wife and son, so if I go back before that, I would. And that was actually quite clear for me. And then that dying for that stranger does two things. This has been a conversation my wife and I have a bunch. And it does two things. One, it would send this signal to the ones that I love about what I'm willing to die for and live for, which is a great, important thing. The second is I don't know if that's significant enough for my loved ones to have that message. So I get caught in between.
Yeah.
My fear is that I would probably hesitate.
Yeah. And you don't know, of course.
That's right.
And so adjudicating these questions is super important for finding meaning. And here's the point. You don't have to go sit at the mouth of a cave and ask the guru, what's the meaning of life? You don't have to do that. You have to look for your answers and look within and think deeply about these questions. And then you're on the path toward finding meaning, and then happiness rises.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it's really, and it's like watching a miracle unfold when somebody answers these questions. Two of my kids are military. And as I told you before, we did the show. One was a scout sniper in the Marine Corps, right near where we're sitting. He was at Camp Pendleton and deployed overseas several times. And he didn't have answers when he went to the Marine Corps. Just didn't.
Oh, it wasn't yes.
No, he didn't have answers. He was, he's a knucklehead.
Yeah, right.
But he came out at 23, married. Now he has a son at 24. He's married and has a son at 24. But and that's very countercultural, by the way, because there aren't that many. And my sons got married at 22 and 23 because they're countercultural, because they're subversive, right?
Yeah,
Again, they don't like the popular culture. They want, which says, don't do that. Wait and see the whole thing. And okay, I mean, whatever floats your boat, but they were rebels in this way and they rebelled in this way. So they had, got married young and have kids. It's like my wife says, raise them Catholic. They do Catholic stuff.
Yeah, right.
But my son Carlos, he got out of the Scout Sniper Platoon in the U.S. Marine Corps, and his answers were, I'm alive. I asked him, because I make my kids write a business plan.
Oh, very cool.
Because they're entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And I'm venture capital.
Okay, good.
And his answers were, I'm alive because God made me to serve others. Very similar to your answer, with a religious component.
Yep.
And what would I die for? I would die for my family, my wife and my son. I would die. Maybe he'd die for me. I'm not sure. I don't want him to.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want him to. I would die for my fellow Marines, and I would die for the United States of America. And how does he know that? Because he made a commitment to knowing that.
He actually knows it.
He signed a contract.
That's right. Yeah. And you could sign that contract at the same time, not actually be fully aligned to it. You're like, no, I made a mistake signing it. You can have any.
Yeah. But this
is your life.
Right. But he has evidence of it. This is one of the reasons that ex-military are usually happier than people who are not ex-military.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Ex-military tend to be very happy people because they have witnessed that for which they are willing to die. So most people, it's like, what am I willing to die for? Or, what would I die for? I don't know. Not being able to hang on for one more minute.
Come on. I do not want that life. I do not want that life.
No.
Yeah,
No. But people don't know because they don't ask.
Yeah.
And when you're in the military, you're confronted with that question.
Yeah. It's such a litmus test for an honest way of living.
That's right. And everybody listening to us can become more effective with a better journey toward meaning, finding the answers or looking for the answers to these questions. And it's a thrill. It's an adventure.
I love this very applied set of questions that you took me down.
Right.
And they'll sit with me for a while too. Like that was my honest response. And then I'll need to go back.
You'll think more. And by the way, none of this is perfect. This is not physics.
Correct. This is what I think that this is the hardest science of all. Yeah. It's invisible. We can't see it. Psychology is something that we live with every moment of our lives, but we can't hold it. Right. And it's very complicated to deal in the world of the invisible. So
it's so interesting your work because you're a clinical psychologist and you do sports, and so in mathematics there's two kinds of problems. There's complicated problems and complex problems. It sounds like I'm splitting hairs, but I'm not. Complicated problems are solvable with enough genius, but they don't change, and you've got the solution forever, like creating a jet engine. Complex problems are human and dynamic. They're behavioral. They're like falling in love or winning the Super Bowl. Those are complex problems. You can simulate the Super Bowl, the Patriots versus the Seahawks. Over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get it right because it's a highly complex and adaptive human situation. So your work is all about the complex.
1,000%.
It's about love. It's about success. It's about human interaction. It's about sports.
Interpretation of the experience.
The problem
experience
in life is that we've got all these complicated solutions to complex problems, and that's why we feel empty.
I love that you did that because I complex, complicated, and simple. And so the way I think about the psychology of excellence is that there's a handful of very simple practices. Humans are the most complex ecosystem on the planet.
Yep.
And what's complicated is to try to match a very simple practice for a highly unique, personal, individual, complex ecosystem. That's complicated because it's not like this Lego goes to this, snaps in perfectly to this unique person. So I see it the same way: complex, complicated, and simple.
Yeah. And the complicated problems are what engineers do.
Yeah.
The complex problems are what the psychologists do.
It's very complex.
And the football coaches do.
Yeah.
And the people dating
very
do.
Dynamic. Yeah, right. Yeah. Telling jokes too.
Totally. It's like, is it gonna work?
I don't know. Yeah. Oh man, what a joy to sit with you, to learn with you.
Thank you. Your work is so inflecting in the lives of so many people. That can be some small part of it. What an honor.
Oh yeah, like a huge part in the way that this conversation is animated with spirit and backed by discernment. And so thank you. I want to point people to your website.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and of course, your books are great.
Thanks.
And you got to write something with Oprah. That's pretty cool.
It's pretty fun. Beats working.
That's
my
pretty
dad
cool.
used to say.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
She gave me a shout out on my book.
Really? That's right.
I found it accidentally. Like I don't know her. I've never met her. But I was like, that was
she's
kind
an
of a cool
incredibly voracious reader and unbelievably over the top intelligent. She was, before I actually met her in person, before we started working together, she read From Strength to Strength, the book that you've read. I was on her book podcast called Super Soul.
Yeah.
And she was quoting me to me by memory.
Whoa. Oh yeah, that's a surreal moment. Very cool.
That's insane. But that just shows, you know, that
Yeah.
her level of absorption of ideas and her ability to apply them in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the gift of being, if you make it to this age.
It's
Or a gift.
it's good to be Oprah.
Yeah. It is, isn't it?
And it's really good to be around her.
Yeah. Sounds like it's good to be Arthur.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people ask, I'm sure they ask you the same thing. You know, they say to me, you must be a naturally happy guy. And I'm like, nope, that's why I study it. Because I want it.
Yeah.
You know, this is
actually, my default is quite anxious.
Of course.
That's why I got here.
In the behavioral science world,
Yeah.
we don't do research, we do me-search.
Yeah, that's right.
You want the answers to the questions that bedevil you. Otherwise, you would just go do, you know, the economics of widget making or something that's relatively irrelevant. You know,
Yeah.
if you want your life to have meaning, it has to be something that's meaningful to you, such that it can be meaningful to other people. So yeah, it's a work in progress.
It's the whip is a great way to go through life. Work in progress. Appreciate you. Thank you. And I can't wait to follow on with you and have more of these.
Thank you for
Yes,
having me
thank
on.
you.
And thanks to all your listeners for finding their mastery and making the world a better place.
Let's go.
Come on.